What's up guys, this is Adam with TAT Express, and in this video I'm going to cover a few things to look for when you're purchasing a Series 60. Also, if you own a Series 60, I'm going to share a few tips to help with the longevity of your engine. Guys, this is an educational video, so if you like this type of content, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're notified when we go live or when we release a new video. Guys, we are servicing at our new location, 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas, 75241. If you'd like to schedule an appointment, you can call us at 972-225-3017. Guys, we are also hiring, so if you feel like you can bring value to our team as a technician or a service writer, be sure to apply on our careers page or give us a call, 972-225-3017. Let's get right into this video. Okay guys, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is the block here on the Series 60. If you guys are in the market or if you own a Series 60, I wanted to discuss one of the main issues that we find on these Series 60. Now, I know you guys are a big fan of this engine because it's non-emissions. This is a 94 model. When you get up into the 2003, those when they have EGRs, they have a little bit more emissions control. So if you look in the market for a non-emissions engine, this is a pretty solid engine. This is going to be a 94 model. This is a 12.7 liter Series 60. A lot of you guys are a big fan of this, but as I want to mention, the first thing you want to be looking for, which is their main concern, is going to be corrosion. Corrosion is going to be the main killer of this engine because corrosion does not only affect the outside, but it affects the inside. We're going to be talking a little bit more about cavitation on the liners and what's happening here on this block. We have a lot of corrosion that's happening where the liners sit here, and what happens is it eats up here, it eats up on the deck here, and it messes with the cylinder liner protrusion. Now, if you just don't pay attention to this and you're just throwing new parts on this, you're not going to get your million miles. So when you're looking for a truck like this, you're looking at this engine, one thing you want to look at is the corrosion here. As you can see, all rusted out here. This is all this is falling off. Now this is just bare block showing. Now you can get away with it for a while, but over time it starts eating up and messing with the structure of the actual block. Another thing you want to look at is you can see these are the motor mounts. The motor mounts are pretty much gone on this. Now this doesn't make it a bad engine. This is just something that you need to be looking for if you're going to be purchasing a Series 60 or if you own a Series 60. Most guys think, oh, if I have a Series 60, all I have to do is put diesel and keep the oil up. But there's a lot more to it. One thing you're going to be mainly looking at is your coolant. You can buy three-way strips to test your coolant periodically to ensure that your coolant is staying right, because if your coolant, if your nitrite levels are off or any of the mixture is off on your coolant, it's going to allow the inside of the block to get corrosion on the inside and just eat up the metal and deteriorate the metal over time, and you're going to have issues with head gaskets. You're going to have issues with liners leaking coolant into the oil. Once that happens, it can just cause all types of problems. Once you get coolant inside the oil, it's just not letting that oil lubricate those main bearings, main bearings at the bottom, and it can heat those bearings up and cause major damage over time. So keeping an eye on your coolant. If you're in the market for this, check out for all this corrosion here. If you see all this, then the next thing I want to talk about is the radiator, which is a big indicator if you have any kind of issues internally. As I mentioned, it's a pretty solid engine, fuel pump here, you got your air compressor, pretty basic engine. There's not much going on with this particular engine, and that's why a lot of people like it. It's not a bad engine, but it's just hard to find one that doesn't have so much corrosion on it. And as you can see, there's work that's been done on this. You can see how much silicone sticking out here on the side of this front cover. A lot of times these trucks have already been taken apart many times. Some shops are trained on this, some shops aren't. Most shops will not be trained on this and just kind of slap parts on, slap parts off. So by the time you buy one, there's no telling how many mechanics have actually been into this particular truck. So we have actually another one here that a customer bought, and right away he's wanting to overhaul it just to make sure there's no problems on the long run. So this is something that I just kind of wanted to mention to you. It's a good engine. We just had a video on this particular truck that we're doing an overhaul on, and we actually had to pull the block to send it off to get it machined. Now this is going to be taking a little bit of time to do, but this is something that we have to do to ensure that this truck is going to be hitting the million-mile marks, because you don't want to spend a lot of money on rebuilding this particular engine and then not being able to hit your million-mile mark. As I mentioned, very solid engine, very easy to work on. Probably one of the easiest trucks to work on. As I mentioned, you have a couple other things up the front. The bull gear, as I mentioned in my last video, that's something that needs to be replaced. You don't want to overlook bull gears. The next thing I want to move over to is the radiator and what to look for on your radiator. So let's move over to the radiator and check it out. Okay guys, so the next thing I want to talk about is the radiator. Now, when you purchase a particular Series 60, or if you own a Series 60, if you're in the market for a Series 60, particularly the non-emissions, this is a 94 model, you want to be looking at basically the condition of the radiator. The condition of the radiator is basically the heart of the cooling system. So if you have a clogged radiator, if it shows a lot of corrosion on the radiator, that's a big indicator that you could have some corrosion going inside that engine. Testing the test strips, checking the test strip is very important. Getting your coolant replaced once a year with new coolant. If you can add more, you can add a little bit of additives like pin cool if your levels are low when you're testing it with the test strip. But it's just best practice to replace that coolant if it looks brown, if it's been used for a long time. Once a year is basically what we like to recommend replacing that coolant. Now, whenever you're running this engine and it's getting hot and it's getting cold, and when the engine's in operation, that coolant goes through a lot of wear, and a lot of times it wears down, it gets brown, it can get milky. Milky will indicate you got some kind of condensation or coolant going into it. But if it turns brown, and it's like say for example, you're running red coolant and it starts turning brown, now when you take the cap off, be careful to check your coolant when it's cooled down and you don't have a hot engine. You don't want coolant spraying on you. So check it when it's cold. When you take that cap off and you look into that tank and you see if it's real brown, that's just an indicator that you got to get that coolant replaced. We don't just recommend replacing it. We do a complete flush where we flush everything out, get all the rust out, all the corrosion out of the system, and refill it, of course, with new coolant. And you want to check it periodically you can buy coolant strip testers online. There's 3-way test strips, really easy to use. You just dip them in there and it's able to tell you. But as you look at this particular radiator, you can see a lot of the fins are folded over. You can see it's pretty rusted. And that's going to give you a lot of indication that, hey, you know what, I could have some issues with that engine. So check it out. Make sure if you do have an older radiator, and if it's original radiator, and you say, for example, it's a 94 model, get that radiator replaced. You don't want to keep pushing that engine with a bad radiator, because that's basically what's cooling the engine and keeping that engine from overheating. And you don't want to overheat these engines, because any engine is not going to work good after being overheated. So this is just something else that I want to point out to you. Next thing I want to do is, why are we looking for this? Why are we looking at the radiator? Why are we looking at the rust on the block? Why are we looking at corrosion on the block? And it's the reason why we're looking for that is because of the internals. The internals is pretty much bare metal. So outside you have a little bit of paint which kind of chips off, but internally is bare metal. So you don't have any paint that's protecting the inside of the liners. You don't have any paint that's protecting the inside of the block. So I want to point out some more of the liners, and so I can show you what's happening if you have a bad mixture of coolant, or if you see a truck that has a lot of corrosion on it. That's going to be an indicator that you could possibly have some stuff going on internally. And as I mentioned, this is one of the main killers of Series 60s, the main killers of these older engines, and any engine, if you don't keep up with your coolant levels. So let's move over to the liners and talk a little bit about that. Okay guys, so what does all this mean? Why are we looking at corrosion on the block? Why are we looking at corrosion on the radiator? Now, if you're in the market for purchasing a Series 60, or if you own a Series 60, you're not going to be able to pull these liners out and inspect them. So this is why I'm kind of pointing out these indicators and what to look for and how to keep your engine up by checking your coolant, keeping an eye on your radiator, keeping an eye on the corrosion that's happening on the outside, because this is what's happening on the inside. Now, this is, like I mentioned, one of the main killers. This is a lot of corrosion that's happening here. Now, as you can see, this line that's here, that's called cavitation. It's pitting, cavitation that's happening here on the liner. Now, also here, you can see the coolant. This is bare metal. This is all bare metal. There's no paint that's protecting this, but as you can see, the condition of this liner, this is internally. This is nothing that you're going to be able to see. You're not going to be able to pull this out and check this before you purchase a Series 60. So this is kind of why I'm mentioning to you to check all these different things out, because if you purchase this Series 60 and you notice all the corrosion, you notice the radiator, and you still purchase it, don't be surprised that this is what's going on the inside of the engine. This is why I wanted to share with you these particular things and how to maintain your coolant. Change that radiator if it's original radiator. If you see corrosion happening on the outside of that block, Make sure you're keeping up with your coolant. Buy you some painting and protect the block if you need to. But on the inside, it's all bare metal. There's nothing that's protecting this on the inside. You can't pull a liner out and put some paint on it to protect it. Keep an eye on that coolant, guys. If it's turning brown, replace it. I recommend replacing coolant at least once a year. Buy you some test strips, periodically test those. Make sure you're testing while the coolant is cold. You don't want to open up your cap while it's hot. When you're checking that coolant, if it looks brown, let's replace it. Once a year, you know, budget for that to get that replaced once a year. If you haven't replaced it in a long time, be prepared to pay for a flush. And this is using chemicals to flush it out. Run it a couple of times with the chemicals on the inside, flush it out. Go ahead and put you some fresh coolant in there and start over. Keep them test strips checking. If you see you have some issues, make sure to change that coolant, guys, because as I mentioned, there's no protection for these liners. The coolant is the only protection for these liners. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I hope this information was useful. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video was useful. If you like this type of content, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're notified when we go live or release a new video. Guys, if you're interested in overhauling your engine, you can schedule an appointment at 972-225-3017. TAT Express is also hiring, so if you feel like you can bring value to our team as a technician or a service writer, be sure to apply online on our careers page or give us a call, 972-225-3017. Guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, be safe.